Prajavahini. I'm Archana Swami. Today, I have the youngest woman honorary consul of India and the only consul general belonging to the minority community. The title that speaks volumes about her remarkable achievements at the young age. She is also the founder and chairperson of Creto, through which she has made significant contributions to trade and community empowerment. As an advocate for women's rights and social equality, her work is commendable. In today's conversation, let's explore her personal journey, the way her family's political background has influenced her career choices, and her vision for the future. Welcoming the Honorary Consul of Republic of Tunisia, Ms. Shabina Sultana. Namaskara, ma'am. Thank you so much for your
Namaskara.
time.
Good morning. And
Very
yes,
good.
I'm glad I'm here with you.
Thank you. So, you have achieved this position of Honorary Consul representing the Indian government in Tunisia. You are the youngest women Honorary Consul of India. What has been the journey like in achieving this milestone? So, how has the journey been for reaching this spot?
So, I'm representing Tunisia in India
Okay.
and basically Bangalore. The consulate is in Bangalore. And the journey has spread over a period of 8 years. And it's really been exciting. It's really been invigorating. I have come across many opportunities and we've started working on opportunities because the governments of both the countries have been very cooperative and looking forward to many more such successful opportunities and successful endeavors.
What are the changes you have seen in India Tunisia relationships over years that you have been associated for 8 years now? And how has that kind of helped you to take some key decisions in the process for 8 years?
India Tunisia bilateral trade relations have been over a long period of time, which could been somewhere between 15 years to 20 years now. And since I've been appointed 8 years ago, and what I could see is with those underlying bilateral trade agreements, the joint cooperations which they have executed amongst themselves, we as the councils or we as the representatives make them as our precedent document, and we try to execute on the similar lines. And having said that, there are, to name a few, we have many bilateral trade agreements, such as in terms of handicrafts, promotion of handicrafts, in terms of a promotion of MOUs or executing of MOUs, which would be between universities, exchange of MOUs which could be related to energy sector, and where we have also have memorandum of understanding in terms of exchange of best practices. And to name a few, and since I belong to Bangalore, I think the most favorite to me is the one executed with ISRO. So I happened to reach ISRO, happened to visit ISRO, happened to meet the entire administration and staff of ISRO. I could understand where India has reached in terms of space technology, and how Tunisia could make best use of such kind of associations and collaborations.
So apart from the ISRO thing, are there any key initiatives that you have proactively taken that gives you a lot of pride?
Yes, I think for me it's always a kick and a motivation when I do something which is really out of the box, and it is not me alone; it's the entire team, especially the Embassy of Republic of Tunisia in New Delhi, which has always supported me, and the entire the machinery and the government of Karnataka has been instrumental in getting many of the activities done. In terms of the agreements, what I was talking, one of the kind would be the sister state agreement, which would be one of its kind, and it's the first agreement which Tunisia would be doing in terms of sister state agreement, where government of Karnataka will be executing an agreement with one of the states in Tunisia, that is state of Haryana is something which we've proposed, and those are in the pipelines, and that forms the basis for many other things or many other activities which I have jotted down in terms of having a good relation between the two, and a fruitful collaboration between the two countries.
Wonderful. Actually, what does honorary mean to you apart from the official responsibilities?
So honorary councils are appointed by the heads of both the countries. In my case, I've been appointed by the president of Tunisia and the president of India, especially when we get something called as the exequatur, which is the letter signed by the presidents. That's an honor for us, and honorary because we are not paid as per the other emoluments and things, but we do get the privileges, and we do come in the precedence, in the sense that we are also recognized by the governments of both the countries, and we represent not only Tunisia here, but I also represent India there, because that's where I belong to as a citizen of the country. I am the brand ambassador for India as well. So that's the pride which I carry.
I'm sure an athlete representing the country or any diplomat, they would have a different set of pride in them as they represent the country in another foreign land. So what is your biggest takeaway when it comes to those experiences of representing your country in a foreign land?
See, I by appointment, by designation, I represent Tunisia in Bangalore, or for that matter, south of India, where my jurisdiction is. But when I travel to Tunisia, I carry a lot of things which I can talk about India, and people ask me about India, because yet since I belong to India, when I travel as a representative of Tunisia, Tunisians themselves ask, how did you get represented as the representative of Tunisia in India? We are Tunisians, but you are an Indian. I said, long story short, there is a procedure and there is a protocol for all of that, which there is no hard and fast rule as this is the way or procedure to be appointed. But having said that, I feel proud, I feel blessed that I don't only represent Tunisia, but when I go to Tunisia, I am a proud Indian there. And yes, a proud Karnataka, Kannadiga girl, of course, that's where I belong to and my heart is.
And also in the process of your international collaborations, you also meet a lot of diplomats and world leaders. So how has that shaped your leadership qualities, as you have been already in the position for 8 years now?
Wow, that's a tremendous learning curve. I have, in fact, as you rightly said, we come across a lot of diplomats, lot of administrative heads, lot of political heads, and which we would not have come across otherwise as a layman. But having said that, it's definitely been a journey of many learnings, experiences. We go wrong sometimes. Our words are wrong. Our statements get to be wrong. Our methodologies changes, but that's okay. It is how you get the critical analysis for the entire thing, and you become a better version. For example, my ambassador who appointed me, when I was appointed first, and he was my ambassador whom I used to report in Delhi, and he always said, you want to follow the rules of a diplomat or you want to follow rules of the politician? I said, Excellency, since I am a quasi diplomat now, I ought to follow the rules of the diplomacy and I need to learn, so please be my mentor. And he was very kind to handhold and to literally teach me every bit of what I am today and what I've learned today, from the smallest things of how to compile a note verbal. There is the protocol and a procedure to communicate, to correspond things. So I think the people you come across are your resource, and it is not about one's ego or arrogance or ignorance. It's about how willing you are, how forthcoming you are to take those teachings, advices, suggestions and incorporate in your work profession.
How open are you to learn?
Yes, how open. You need to keep that kind of a mindset, and you should be willing to tackle every kind of challenge that you come across.
you represent minority group of people in India, and as a woman, what are the challenges that you have seen representing that certain group? And probably you are one among the rarest of the rare group, standing along 100 other diplomats.
Yeah, so this is one of the most sensitive questions, and I come across these kind of questions, or very close ones, as you've just questioned me. I belong to a minority community, and as you are aware, we are just a small percentile when compared to the entire country's population. Keeping that aside, even in our community, it's a very conservative thought process they follow, and women are not given that kind of a support or upliftment when where it has to be done, or where everybody is equal in today's society or community for that matter. But having said that, I am very blessed. I'm very happy that I belong to a family where my parents have always dealt with the scenario that all kids, all children, men, women, boys, girls, are to be treated equally. They need to be given the best of education, and there needs to be financial independence, social independence, which through which one thrives. So my father has always taught me that not only you as my daughter, but I would want to convey this message to the entire country, to the entire nation, that women should be dealt on the same equal, or the equal parity. Yes, equal parity, and they must be given that equality, status of equality, without any discrimination, to the extent that they've been given good education, good social status, and good emotional status as well. Because if you are not providing them the support or uplifting them, you are not only holding back your family, but you're holding back the society, you're holding back the entire nation, because the women is responsible to impart best practices, best way of life, not to one person, but to the entire family. And from the family, of course, you go outward to your community and nation. And my father has taken up these values, not solely being a father, but on the religious principles, which in our community, in our Muslim community, say that women have to be treated equally. Yes.
Now we have two questions right now. Like, one, I want to definitely talk about more of your family background and the amazing legend politician CM Ibrahim ಅವರು. ಅವ್ರ ಜೊತೆ ಅವ್ರ ಹತ್ರ ಒಂದೆರಡು ಸಲ ಏನೋ ನೋಡಿದ್ವಿ ಅವ್ರನ್ನ, ಆದ್ರೆ ಮಾತಾಡ್ಸಿಲ್ಲ. ಆದ್ರೆ ಅವರ ಪ್ರಿನ್ಸಿಪಲ್ಸ್ ಆಗಿರ್ಲಿ ಅಂಡ್ ಅವರ ಒಂದು ಏನಂತಾರೆ ರಾಜಕೀಯ ಅನುಭವ ಆಗಿರ್ಲಿ, ಅದನ್ನ ಮುಂದುವರಿಸಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಅನ್ಸಿಲ್ವಾ?
ವೆಲ್, ನಾನೊಂದು ಪೊಲಿಟಿಷಿಯನ್ ಮಗಳು. ರಾಜಕೀಯ ಇದ್ರಲ್ಲಿದೆ, ಬ್ಲಡ್ ಅಲ್ಲೇ ಇದೆ. ನಾನು ಕಾಂಗ್ರೆಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇದ್ದೆ 4 ವರ್ಷ ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಸ್ಪೋಕ್ಸ್ ಪರ್ಸನ್ ಆಗಿದ್ದೆ. ನಾನು ಇದರಲ್ಲೂ ಆಲ್ ಇಂಡಿಯಾ ಪ್ರೊಫೆಷನಲ್ ಕಾಂಗ್ರೆಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲೂ ಸ್ಟೇಟ್ ವೈಸ್ ಪ್ರೆಸಿಡೆಂಟ್ ಆಗಿದ್ದೆ, ಅಂಡರ್ ಶಶಿ ತರೂರ್ ಅವರು, ಮತ್ತೆ ಕಾಂಗ್ರೆಸ್ ಪ್ರೆಸಿಡೆಂಟ್ ದಿನೇಶ್ ಗುಂಡೂರಾವ್ ಅವರು ಇದ್ರು. ಸೊ ನಾನು ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೀನಿ ರಾಜಕೀಯದಲ್ಲಿ, ನಂದು ಇದೆ, ಇಷ್ಟ ಇದೆ. ಆದ್ರೆ ನನ್ಗೊಂದು ಅವಕಾಶ ಸಿಕ್ತು ಡಿಪ್ಲೊಮಸಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಬರ್ಬೇಕು. ಬಂದ ತಕ್ಷಣ ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ತುಂಬಾ ಸಪೋರ್ಟ್ ಸಿಕ್ತು, ತುಂಬಾ ಆಶೀರ್ವಾದ ಸಿಕ್ತು. ನಮ್ಮ ಅಪ್ಪ ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು, ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಇದ್ರಲ್ಲೂ ನೋಡು, ಅದ್ರಲ್ಲೂ ನೋಡ್ಬಹುದು. ಸೊ ದಟ್ಸ್ ವೈ ಐ ಆಮ್ ಹಿಯರ್.
ಮುಂದೆ ರಾಜಕೀಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾದ್ರೂ ಪುನಃ ನಿಮ್ಮನ್ನು ನೋಡೋ ಚಾನ್ಸ್ ಇದೆಯಾ?
ನೆವರ್ ನೋ. ಏನ್ ನನ್ನ ಇದ್ರಲ್ಲಿ ಏನ್ ಡೆಸ್ಟಿನಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಿದೆ ಅಂತ ನನ್ಗೂ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ. ಬಟ್ ಯಾವಾಗ್ಲೂ ನಂಗೆ ರಾಜಕೀಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಬರ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಒಂದು ಆಸೆ ಇದೆ. ನೋಡೋಣ ಮುಂದುವರೆ ಏನಾಗತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ. ನನಗೂ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ, ನಿಮ್ಗೂ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ. ಸೊ ಲೆಟ್ ಇಟ್ ಬಿ ಆಸ್ ಅ ಸರ್ಪ್ರೈಸ್.
ಆಗ್ಲಿ, ಮುಂದೆ ನೋಡೋಣ. ಆ ಅನುಭವ, ಆ ಬ್ಲಡ್ ನಿಮ್ಮನ್ನ ಎಲ್ಲಿ ಕರ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹೋಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ we'll wait and watch.
Yes, we'll all wait and watch. We'll hope for the best, and if I'm destined to be there, I will be there one day.
Yes. And coming back to the women empowerment, you have been a strong advocate about not only the minority women coming up,
yes,
but also women empowerment and also student counseling too.
Yeah.
So what are the things that you feel that can change to provide better opportunities for women?
Yeah. So that's been very, very close to my heart, because I've seen how women have been struggling. They are very enthusiastic, and they just need that handhold, that support. It's just a push which is lagging right now. And I think I've been working with many more such organizations which really uplift women in terms of skill development, in terms of providing them that extra awareness, in terms of providing them training. And in fact, I run two organizations, which is Creto, and which is also another one called Warmth. Warmth is especially for women empowerment and for the underprivileged children. I've been doing a lot of activities which would help them kind of have some kind of financial independence, if not completely. And it's about providing them the emotional support, the moral support, which is very much lagging at this point. And Creto, of course, we also have this Creto Online, which is a subsidiary of Creto, on which we provide awareness programs. We provide short-term courses there in terms of what could be the next skill which would help them, what could be the incubation required. We provide them training, like the theory and the practical. The theory is given online and the practical is imparted outside, whichever skill it is related to. So things like that, I've been trying a lot to help the women in need and women whom I think are really deprived of such kind of opportunities.
And as you spoke about Creto, like you have been, I wouldn't say expert, but yes, you have been explicitly working and also have fair knowledge about the law and trade also.
Yeah.
So what are the key changes that you think that can create more opportunities in respect to trade opportunities in India?
So Creto has been my baby, and we've started Creto with the intention of promoting trade, commerce, culture, not only between the states of Karnataka, but going across borders. And having said that, what I feel, what's lacking here, or probably what is not communicating properly, is with the bilateral trade agreements already executed. There are certain products which are having huge amount of custom duties and taxes, which are really not reasonable. And there could be joint commissions between the two countries, where after enough negotiations and mediation, those kind of most required, most essential products could get the tax or the tariffs reduced to a large extent. So these joint commissions have to happen very often, where there are commodities, there are products which really are in need, or they could be forming the part of the basic needs, and the supply is also there. But what we need to bridge the gap and probably provide some kind of policy suggestions or advices that this product is required, and if both the countries on a G2G basis, they come together on joint commissions and understand what's required or what's the demand of the ground level is, it becomes easier for them to work on a larger scale. It becomes easier because the policy makers who are sitting at the top or the helm of affairs are not aware of what the ground reality or what is the requirement at ground zero. So this gap between the two has to be somehow calculatively monitored and erased.
Right?
So that is where people like us, we are sitting here, we understand when we talk to there's something called as people to people diplomacy in us, right? So when diplomats, ambassadors, consul generals, honorary consul generals meet a lot of people. So when we meet a lot of people, we understand what is lacking, what are the opportunities, where is that we can convey the message to the top officials or the top governmental heads that this is what is lagging. And when we try to do that, there are answers for the problems, correct? And when these problems are every problem has a solution. I hope you are in sync with me on that. And when we are giving or providing solutions, that these are the things, and it does not require a big change. It's just fine tuning of what is existing, and then the life becomes easy. For example, if I really want to make some changes in relation to Tunisia, dates are imported into India. That's the agricultural products, and dates consumption is huge in India, correct? We do not produce dates. Agriculturally, we don't. In fact, we tried doing that in Rajasthan, but we could not succeed. Having said that, the import on dates is about 45% plus. And it is like, if you want to get the best quality dates, you have to pay at least 50% more to the cost of what's available in the other country. So if I am producing, Tunisia is producing dates, we could have a G2G agreement or a joint commission where we could have preferential trade agreement to bring down the rates of the duty. There are possibilities, and we need to also understand, if we are bringing down the rates of the duty, what is Tunisia going to give in return? So it's mutually agreed upon, and it's mutually consensus agreement, right? So that's called as preferential trade agreement, and it is generally mooted between the developing country or underdeveloped country. So there are options, there are policy norms, but it is again the fine tuning and the political will. These are the shortcomings which I thought would really make a huge difference. And if I am able to given my suggestions, which I always have and always will, and to a large extent they are taken into consideration, because I'm not talking as a representative of one country, but representative of both the countries.
And proactive leaders like you, if you take the initiatives and keep continuously working on it, I'm sure the bridges are narrowed down, and the benefit is not just for the political or the diplomatic people, but everybody in the country. So
absolutely.
Overall, the empowerment of person who is producing is benefited in the end. So I think it's a win-win situation for literally everybody included. Coming to your work, not just for trade and bilateral relationships and economic empowerment, but also focus has been on education a lot more. So where is that passion for education coming, that you are not only doing through your NGOs, but also being a part of cultural events or the fests or representing events in colleges? Like, you have clearly taken every opportunity that came your way where you can support or inspire or lead. So where is this coming from?
I think my father. So even if I get 1% of what he has as a charismatic person he is, I would be blessed, and I would definitely want to chase my dreams based on how he sees or perceives the world to be. So he is my role model, and I don't have to go nowhere. He's my mentor, he's my advisor, everything that I can consider of. We run a group of colleges and institutions. That's again my father's dream, which came true. And he always said that education is the best way of empowering an individual. It's about creating good and responsible human beings. And having an educational institution itself is a huge responsibility, right? So as a diplomat, as a thought leader, I really express myself, and there have been various occasions where I've been called as a speaker, as a chief guest, as guest of honor, and throw some light on particular topic, or probably inspire students, inspire a community, inspire a fraternity. And I feel that's one of the ways which I thrive my passion, right? And if I'm able to express my thoughts, and those thoughts are going to impact somebody's life in a positive manner, then I think I'll be the most satisfied human at the end of the day. And we all work, we all thrive, we've all achieved, we all have endeavored certain objectives and goals in our lives. But there is one little aspiration, like, how will I do good what is that I can really say or do for that day where I will be satisfied, happy, and I can go back to sleep on my bed peacefully, saying that, okay, thank God, I'm thanking God with entire gratitude that I've received this today. I've given back more than what I've received today.
In fact, as you see, the graph of women at the leadership roles, as the role just goes high, it just is so narrow. So, what do you want to suggest or give as a suggestion to aspiring women who want to reach up to the leadership roles?
I, Archana, I think I differ with that. I mean, I don't think the graph is narrowing. In fact, from what it was to what it is,
improving.
like both of us sitting on these power centers and having a conversation itself is an achievement. Normally, when I'm there, I would encounter a male interviewer, or when you're sitting there, it would be otherwise.
Yes.
But this is the proof that we are not lagging behind, and I think that's just a mindset now. I see so many of the women leaders. Even in my fraternity, we have women who are outperforming. Okay, it's nothing to downgrade anybody. In fact, I feel it's the male and the female association collaboration which is the best. I do not want to say that this is what needs to be done or that is what needs to be done or it's one up. No, I feel as women and men, we have our own advantages, our own strengths. If men are physically stronger, women are emotionally stronger. And that combination is a lethal combination, and we can achieve the world. We are interdependent on each other, and it will continue for the rest of what I understand the world is going to be living or thriving.
Okay, let me rephrase that. So, for many women who aspire to reach bigger roles, what suggestion would you give them? Because you have seen the growth, seen the graph.
Definitely. I would feel that every man or women should have the attitude of inclusivity. Include everybody in your success, include everybody in their success and each other's success or failures. Success would be a stepping stone, failures are a learning curve. So, if one is able to support each other, we are all social animals at the end, and we cannot thrive alone. We have to have some kind of support. It could be moral support, it could be emotional support, it could be financial support, it could be any kind of support which we require from each other. At the end of it, when you are able to give and you have the mindset to give, but most important for the other is to receive. You are giving, but the other is having a closed mind thought process, it would not impact. So it's all about give and take. It's about having a mutual understanding of how one is going to help the other, and it's about growing together in an inclusive society.
Today, from the time you have been in politics, or today by being a diplomat, what is the kind of world that you have seen changing around you that makes you the happiest?
So, I have literally. Okay, fine. If you're asking about the change in terms of profession, yes, it.
Not only a profession. I mean, yes, please.
Yeah. So the people associated with my political being or my political career are totally different from what I encounter now. So here, my dad always says, so this from political being, you've moved on to the suit boot being and with the collared up thing and all of that. So. See, political is more connected with the masses, right? So you are coming across people, understanding their problems, getting into the root levels and trying to understand the integrity of what is happening at your state, at your station, at your political, location or it could be a city, it could be a rural district, or it could be something of that. But when you are working diplomatically, we are not encountering this huge amount of masses on a day-to-day basis, but it is about the top administration, because that is where you decide on policies which are impacting the foreign relations of two countries, and the foreign relations would be incomplete unless and until you talk about trade, commerce, culture, people to people diplomacy, and many such things. Of course, political is something which is anyways there. Okay, but here it is limited amount of people, but the people who would definitely make an impact and are able to take decisions. But when you're talking about the political circles, is I think is more about the people. It's more about the emotional aspect of how you deal with their pain, how you deal with their day-to-day requirements, and then you go up on how you can impact the policy making.
I'm sure being in the diplomat status, you are definitely having great pride in it. But do you think emotionally you are a lot connected with people when you are in politics?
No, I think I'm connected with people any which ways. I think I really love, I'm a very social person, and it's really a happy feeling for me to meet people, to talk to them, to understand what is good, what is bad. Traveling is one of my biggest assets. And I think somewhere because of my nature of being very open, very understanding, I'm a good listener, and that has been an advantage to me always. And I listen to people not to react but to respond, and that has been my strength, and I think I've learned it from my father. And again, to mention that, and I really love to be in the public forum and in the public communities, and any kind of events, any kind of conferences, any kind of meetings where I get to see and meet and evolve among the best forces. It could be in a good way that they are impacting me, or it could be in a bad way that they're trying to influence me. But it is for me to take in what best will impact me and how best I can transform and evolve myself.
In fact, Puna Puna nim tande aur maat barta hai. Can we just go back to your childhood, speak a few memories, and speak that journey so that we cover what his experience has translated into your life?
ಸೊ ನಮ್ಮ ಅಪ್ಪ ಅವರು ಬ್ಯಾಂಗ್ಳೂರಿಂದ, ಭದ್ರಾವತಿಯಿಂದ ಬೇಸಿಕಲಿ. ಅವ್ರ ಪೊಲಿಟಿಕಲ್ ಜೀವನ ಅಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ಆಯಿತು. ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಎಮರ್ಜೆನ್ಸಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಅವರು ಜೈಲ್ ಹೋದ್ರು, ಅದೆಲ್ಲ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿರೋದು. ಬಟ್ ಮೈ ಮಾಮ್, she is from Kerala, and I was born in Kerala but brought up in Bangalore. Did my schooling, college illೇ ಹೋದೆ. ಅದಾದ್ಮೇಲೆ the political journey of my father has been really interesting, and that is why I think since we've grown up seeing his political struggle, his political acumen, his achievements, his success stories. And there have been also debacles, that's okay, which everybody is aware of, and everybody goes through it. It's life is all about ECG cardiogram graph where there are ups and downs. It's just that you need to see that you are not taken to such a spike. You're just having a control, and you go with the flow, saying that I still have to answer somebody who is sitting above us. And that is one principle which my father has always taught his kids. We are about 9 of us, with like 8 daughters and 1 son. I am being the eldest. And the one lesson he always said, that however successful you are, however wealthy you become, however spiritual you are, one thing you always need to remember is your parents are somebody you cannot forget, and there is a true being a universal being which is sitting above us, which is God Almighty, and be thankful. Express your gratitude when you wake up, express your gratitude when you sleep, before you sleep, and always give back. Always give back to everybody or everything that you are responsible to, and to whom you think you've always received something from. And politically, yes, I think I bleed politics. I definitely see myself very, very close to his political acumen and his political achievements, in terms that I learn a lot. In fact, there's this chair of my father in his office room, and I always sit on that, and I was like, yes, someday I will be sitting here types. And when I was small, I must be a year old, baby, infant, in fact. I think my mom or my dad, I don't know, they've made me sit in that. I have held that picture till date. And I always compare with what I'm sitting now and that, and say, someday I'm going to be here. And yes, that's something which I aspire. I've enjoyed seeing my dad throughout his journey, and loads to learn. When I was a spokesperson, I used to go back to him and I would sit with him and ask him, is this okay, is that okay? He would only tell me that, are you clear on the facts and the figures? Did you evaluate the entire note you have? I said yes, and said, do not say anything which will demean somebody or emotionally hurt somebody. This is not a personal vendetta. It is about a struggle. It is about conveying a message. Do that. That's your work, and come out. And I think that's a principal statement which I carry throughout my journey and in my life.
And whichever career you are, you're still
Any
carrying
career.
that.
Yes.
ಚಿಕ್ಕ ವಯಸ್ಸಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಗಿತ್ತು, ಲೈಕ್ ಅವರು ರಾಜಕೀಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಬ್ಯುಸಿ ಆಗಿರ್ತಿದ್ರು, ಟೈಮ್ ಕೊಡ್ತಿದ್ರ?
ಅವ್ರು ಟೈಮ್ ಕೊಡ್ತಿದ್ರು. ಐ ವಾಸ್ ಇನ್ ಮೈ ಸ್ಕೂಲ್. ಅವರು ಟಿಫನ್ ತಗೊಂಡ್ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರು ನನ್ಗೆ ಲಂಚ್ ಅವರ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ. ನಾನ್ ಬೆಳಿಗ್ಗೆ ಟಿಫನ್ ತಗೊಂಡ್ ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಇರೋದು ನನ್ ಇಷ್ಟ ಇರ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಸೊ ಹಿ ಯೂಸ್ ಟು ಕಮ್, ಐ ಯೂಸ್ ಟು ಟೇಕ್ ಹಿಮ್ ಟು ದ ಕ್ಯಾಂಟೀನ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಹೋಗಿ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಏನೇನ್ ಬೇಕೋ ಅದೆಲ್ಲ ತಗೊಂಡು 1 week ರಾಷನ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಸೆಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೆ. ಅಂಡ್ though he was in politics, though he was busy, that we hardly used to get some time to be with each other. ಆದ್ರೂ ಅವರು ಎಷ್ಟು ಆ ಕ್ವಾಲಿಟಿ ಟೈಮ್ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿರೋದು, ಅದೇ ನಮ್ಮ ಹತ್ರ ಇರೋದು. ಇಟ್ಸ್ ನಾಟ್ ದ ಕ್ವಾಂಟಿಟಿ.
ನಿಮಗೆ ಅವರು ತುಂಬಾ ಇನ್ಸ್ಪಿರೇಷನ್ ಅಂತ ಕ್ಲಿಯರ್ ಆಗಿ ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತಿದೆ. ಆದ್ರೆ ಅವ್ರ ಕಡೆಯಿಂದ ಹೇಗಿದ್ರು ಅವರು? ಲೈಕ್ ಒಂದು ಸ್ಟ್ರಿಕ್ಟ್ ಪ್ಯಾರೆಂಟ್ ಆಗಿದ್ರ, ತುಂಬಾ ಮುದ್ದು ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ರ, ಹೇಗಿದ್ರು?
ನಮ್ಮ ಅಮ್ಮ ಅವ್ರು ತುಂಬಾ ಸ್ಟ್ರಿಕ್ಟ್ ಇದ್ರು. ನನ್ ಎಲ್ಲಾ ಸಿಕ್ಕಿರೋದು ಕೋಲಿಂದಾನು, ಇದ್ರಲ್ಲೂ ವೆಸಲ್ ಕುಕ್ಕರು ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ಸಿಕ್ಕಿರೋದು ನನ್ನ ಅಮ್ಮಯಿಂದ. ಮೈ ಡ್ಯಾಡ್ ವಾಸ್ ನೆವರ್, he was very polite, and he handled us very politely, very respectfully, and he used to get upset, but it's not the kind that you would not connect, you know. We always went back to him, and he used to sit us down. Our jokes nimge gottirodalva, so we all used to sit and have fun with his witty jokes, his accents, and ellargu on hesru. So we all had these names, very funny names that he used to give. And Gundamma irbodu, Chandramma irbodu. Our most favorite idu ragi mudde ಮತ್ತು ನಾಟಿ ಕೋಳಿ. So we all got into the habit of traveling across places and, you know, finding for good. We are all like foodies, and my dad being the most. So any place we used to go with, and he used to love these road journeys. And you know, pack foods, the typical, you know, the person normal upbringing and all of that. It's not that we used to have this the societal norms, nothing. We were brought up in such a humble way, and I think that's what we carry, and we cherish every minute or every moment of that. ಆ ದಿವಸ ಫೋನು ಇರಲಿಲ್ಲ, no distractions, mobile phone ಇರಲಿಲ್ಲ. So it's all about being one to one, a personal communication. And my dad, even when my mom used to be a little strict, he used to say no being physically abusive. You know, you can't hit the kids. And I was very naughty. I mean, I don't blame my mom also. I was the tomboy
Back
then.
then it was
Huh.
common. All of us used to.
Yeah, but for me, I used to be, my circles used to be all the boys of the family, and we used to be physically in all the games, you know, the physical games. It's not even the board games we used to have or any of that. I used to be in karate, I used to be in Coco, and whatever. I mean, any physical activity, I used to be on the ground. And my mom had set these rules that I have to come back before 6 p.m. in the morning, and I used to come 6:15. Like 15 minutes, I used to take those extra, and then she used to be waiting outside the house just to, you know, to take charge and really give it to me types.
You said you were a social person, right? So back then onwards you were.
It was always like that, and for me, I think my dad is my inspiration. The way he just goes out and just thrives and captures the world, I just look at him. That's all about me, and me pursuing and achieving my goals as well.
And coming back to your education, you have kind of perceived different arts and entertainment, management. Like the degrees you have taken also are like one not related to other. Probably you were exploring a lot, and that happens only when the child is fully supported.
Yes.
So how has that choices been in your life? Was it?
Oh, that again is very hilarious. My father envisaged me being a doctor, and I had to do medicine. But then I said, Dad, I can't do this. Even when there was this assessment which was done in schools in 9th and 10th, every assessment of mine turned out to be becoming a leader, taking up a leadership role into administration, a political career, or something related to that. I was never going to being a doctor. But having said that, even if I was a doctor, I would have been very good doctor, because my empathy levels are a little high, and I understand, and I think I really can be a good doctor. But that was not where I was supposed to be, right? So at the end of it, we had a little bit of imbalance while choosing my career goals and what I wanted to do. But once I took it up, in fact, yes, I have given my KS, I have cleared my Karnataka Administrative Civil Services, but for some reason I couldn't pursue it. And my father is very well aware, and he said, even though you did not take it up, I know you've achieved it. That's my achievement too. And after that, I did complete my Masters of Business Administration. I've done my company secretariat. I have not literally practiced as my profession, but yes, I am having enough knowledge on that as well. But since the time I got into politics for a brief period, I have taken up many courses there which could relate my profession to that, like going and taking up leadership courses. Steve Jarding is one of them, who is very renowned, and he was instrumental in a lot of United States political developments and structuring. And then I came into diplomacy. In diplomacy, I've done various courses which could upskill me, which could kind of sharpen my understanding of what needs to be done in diplomacy and how I could really help the countries I'm serving and myself as well.
And I just wanted to add a word there that you wanted to be a doctor to just heal, and you had that empathetic hurt. And you still are healing hearts, right? You are still helping people, empowering people. So the job which needs to be done is being done, irrespective of whichever profession you chose.
Thank you.
So may that blessings turn around
Thank
and
you
come
so
back
much,
to you.
Archana. Thank you so much.
Coming back to your social activities, you've been quite a social reformer. So So again, that also comes back to your dad.
I don't know
I think
if
I
I'm
don't
a
want to
reformer per
face-
se. I haven't done anything drastic to become a social reformer, but yes, I would
Voice.
follow, and I have voiced out on strong advocacies which have already been spelt, and those being mostly advantageous or strengthening women empowerment, and also in terms of geriatrics. I am a strong advocate of supporting elderly and helping them in their causes of providing some kind of policy changes where more of elderly health, especially their mental health, is taken care. And we are working with few of the other renowned personalities, different having different backgrounds. They become the core group in formalizing or probably modifying the existing norms or existing rules or policies of elderly health and elderly care, or geriatrics is the right word which I can use.
In fact, in our conversation, a couple of times we spoke about how emotional health and mental health is a lot important.
True.
So, in the challenges that we face every single day, to what extent that part, I mean, a major part of that is only until we have a serious issue that we address.
Yes.
It could be any mental health issue
Yes.
or economically, even if we are struggling,
Yeah.
we would only focus on that aspect, but how mentally that's affecting is hardly spoken.
Correct.
So, what would you broadly give as a suggestion for today's youth or today's women, say, to take care of not just their emotional well-being, but also have that understanding of where they are mentally and how they can take care for a better tomorrow?
So I think we are in such a stage or in a phase where there's lot of information which is being poured onto us, right? The world has become a small space, and you get to hear, you get to see a lot of things which earlier was not the case. And with all of this, our mind is constantly at work and struggle. We are not able to decide on what we need to actually take, process, and utilize, to what we should not be taking, process, or throw. In the struggle, we come across challenging situations as to which way do we go. What is that we need to opt? What is that we need to let go? But what I feel is we need to say or learn to say no, which is the most important, and which we are just not paying much attention to, or probably we're just brushing it under the carpet types. So for me, when you talk about mental health, emotional health, we all deal with it in some form or the other. It could be on a smaller scale, it could be on a medium scale, or it could be on a larger scale. But first, identify that there is something wrong, and it is not a social stigma. And there are many various options, there are many various avenues of which things have come to an innovative, conceptualized way of first diagnosing that you are having an issue mentally or emotionally, and there is a solution to that. Our approach, the individual approach, should be that it's okay to be mentally ill. It's not a stigma. It is not that everybody would probably what do you say, demean you, or probably cut you off with what you are going through. So it's always okay to go and accept. First, you need to be aware of your own sickness, of your own disabilities. then you need to approach professionally, you need to approach it medically, you need to approach it through your family, you need to first acknowledge the fact that there is an issue. And once you have acknowledged and once you take the help or the support of what is offered to you, there is a solution to that as well. And it's okay. And the major reason for all of this is the information overload you have. You do not know what to take and what to let go of. And with all of those challenges and confusions created in your mind, you're not able to decide, right?
And I think today's fast
There is a
life is
dilemma.
also
Yes.
just not allowing that space to process.
Yes. Whatever could be the reason, there is a dilemma, and when you come across that dilemma, you are not able to decide. And when you're not able to decide, that's where the problem is, right? So you need to have clarity of thoughts. Clarity of thoughts is very, very important to make any decision. It could be a financial decision, it could be a societal decision, it could be a familial decision, it could be a relationship issue, it could be anything. Unless and until you have clarity of thought, you are stuck. And there, it's okay, it's fine to be mentally ill, mentally sick, but do not carry with it. You need to go and address it ASAP. There are people who they belong to the best of families, they could be celebrities, there could be well acquainted people, and the amount of suicides happening now is the gravest of the examples I can cite where they are not being dealt with properly.
I think we come across listening to these episodes every second day.
Yes.
Yeah. At some point when there's a tough day or a tough time,
Yeah.
whom do you go to? Like, who is your go-to person?
I think my entire set of girls, my strength, my support, even though they're all based out in Dubai, because all of them are studying from there, or they're doing, they're working out from there, they're married there. I'm the only one here with my dad. My mom travels or between hops on and hops off between Dubai and Bangalore. But anything and everything, we come on the bottom call with 8 frames or 7 frames on it, and then we just have to blabber. That's my venting place, and we often meet, we often travel together. Those are my best days, where I literally forget every stress, every worry of me, and I just am totally indulging in them, among them, and into them. So yeah. Apart from that, I'm trying to get back to my workout regime, and that's the biggest stress buster for me. And the more I sweat like my father, and when he runs on the treadmill, the entire floor is flooded. So that's how even I sweat. So that's one of my major stress busters. Apart from that, I do try to, I'm religious to a large extent. I'm more spiritual than being religious. I connect with the supreme human being, and I try to express myself and my thoughts. I try to connect with him. And the major formula I consider I have is I'm a very optimistic person. And being positive is the pill of the day. I think just be positive, just be happy, and the rest is all taken care.
With a great support of family, you have been able to do with your inner strength, I could say, being a diplomat, an entrepreneur, a social, person. So how do you draw back to yourself? Like, what is that strength that takes you to do 100 multiple things and still have some time for yourself? How is that focus still back onto you after all this?
I don't know if I have time for myself or what is having time for myself, because my happiness is being amongst everybody, believing in each other, kind of having that optimistic approach, as I said,
for me, that's
it.
my
You're
me time.
recharged there.
I am recharged. That's the kick, like again coming back to my father. For me, it's just like him. If
Your
you are
social
amongst
bee.
people, that's your energy. You just have your energy by listening to them, by having a good conversation, by learning something and laughing. Be happy. That's me time for me. That's complete me time.
You have had a fabulous journey. What is the vision that you look at this phase of your life?
Oh my God, I have a long list of things I need
We
to
have all the
achieve.
time. Please tell.
Yes, I have a long list of things I want to achieve. I have a lot of things in my work to do list, and uh, I don't know. It's really I've envisaged a lot of things at this point I need to reach there. At this point I need to achieve this. There are timelines associated with it, which is very important. Without timelines, you're just amongst the
Aimlessly
herd.
just
Yes,
going.
you're just among the herd, right? So for me, if I take up something, it has to be completed within a time frame, and I give my complete resource allocation to it. So it's either do or die. So I do not take up anything which I think I'm not able to achieve. That's something which I always think about myself, and I see if I have, I have to kind of feed my own ego more than anything else. I don't have any ego or attitude with others, but it's about myself. I need to please myself, and pleasing myself is respecting myself. So I feel that if I've taken up a task, I ought to do it, and there's nothing called perfection for me. I don't believe in coming first or top. That's not where I want to be. I would want to dedicate my best to that task, complete it, and be satisfied and happy at the end of the day.
Lovely. And what is the message that you want to leave our audience with? You have been quite inspiring in the long conversation, but how do you summarize? How do I summarize the lessons I've learned from this conversation, or what is the message that you want to give today's youth, students, or the women to look forward towards life?
I think the only message I have, and I've always been conveying to most of the audience or the people I come across, is first is have a clear and clean intent. This forms a basis, a foundation for anything that you take up in life. If your intent is not clear, or it is hurting somebody, it is not doing good to anybody, then there is nothing that you can achieve in life. That forms the foundation. If you're not able to do good, do not do bad. This is something which my dad has always been teaching us, and my mom also, for that matter. It's about just being empathetic, just being human enough.
Mm.
That's the basic. If you are human enough, you are not going to hurt, you're not going to do wrong, you will not even have that thought process in your mind.
I think that's more than enough for us to conclude the interview with the amazing experience you have had in life and what a fabulous journey you had been through. So that's quite inspiring. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Archana. I think this is not the end of it, and my journey is going to continue, and I'm
Sure.
going to come back to you, and
Absolutely, we would love to.
yes, and I'm going to express and going to have many more interviews as such, because I completely thoroughly enjoyed this attention from you, and where I could talk my heart out other than me being a part of the bigger audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.